Okay, yeah, so this is going to be the first of this new type of video that I'm going to try to make. Yeah, I've been getting a lot of viewer requests for some type of weekly, metagame or, some kind of weekly recap type video. I don't know that I'm necessarily qualified to say exactly like how the entire metagame is going. For one thing, I've been a bit out of the challenge scene for a little while. I'm hoping to get back in, but just the weekends. Sometimes there's like stuff, both work and personal, that just makes it difficult to get these things started. Um, if these things started more like 2 p.m. or something, then might be a little bit easier. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. um, yeah. What I can do actually is I can basically try to give an idea of like where I think that our decks are at in the format, the decks that I play, and I guess with that in mind, let's start with the with obviously I think my most famous deck, the deck that kind of was my main claim to fame. I think. Well, I mean, maybe that's not fair to say. At least one of my biggest claims to fame, Obosh Red. Of course, Merfolk is very close, and obviously, probably I think Merfolk was kind of an earlier deck I was associated with. Because I do actually think Merfolk was, well, I mean, it's not here nor there, but I actually did kind of feel like Merfolk was a bit more of a stable, solid deck than Burn. Not that I have anything against Burn. I sometimes got incredibly good results, but sometimes very mediocre results. I just remember that Merfolk always felt like a deck that when I tuned it, I could get it to the point where I could consistently get sort of like 4-1 type results if I really played super tight. And Burn just always felt like, yeah, I could get 5-0s a decent amount of time, but then I would also get like 3-2s or 2-3s, and it just felt like a lot of it was outside of my control. But anyway, so starting off with Red Deck wins though, or I should say, Obosh Red. Yeah, one of the reasons I actually moved to this deck in the first place was because it felt like I kind of had more control over over how the games went. So oops. So in any case, Obosh Red. Okay, so where are we at? So honestly, I mean, there's not much more I can say about where we're at with Obosh Red, other than that I seem to be doing really, really well so far. The way the metagame is presently. I mean, and this might be a little bit of a problem making this weekly content because sure, like I got a lot of reps in. Um, in the last few weeks or so. I can't guarantee that I'm always going to necessarily be able to jam as many games during the week. Sometimes like historically, most of the reps I got in for my MTG, gameplay has been has been on the weekends. So and it's still possible that sometimes that might happen that way. So it might be possible that there's some weeks that I may not have a lot to talk about. So I hope that it's not an issue, but I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to make something like this every week. But I thought at least I'd get started. Maybe I can. For whatever reason, I have been able to get more reps in for a while now, and other than on a few occasions, I seem to, you know, I might have enough to talk about every week, but I can't guarantee it. In any case, so when I look back at because I'm trying to keep some kind of track of my games. And so I have seen actually more Grixis Shadow than you might think, and I seem to be doing very well. Like I see that I have a number of I see that I have like a 2-0 against them, and yeah, boys, the metagame is so diverse. There's so many different types of decks, which I guess is a good thing. But yeah, so like against against Grixis Shadow. Like a lot of it is playing around. What's it called? Stubborn Denial. And a lot of it is actually landing a Blood Moon. And sometimes they're able to fetch a basic island and a basic swamp. But actually, I think one thing that people miss about Blood Moon in the Shadow matchups is that it completely turns off their ability to to drop their life total voluntarily, other than like bolting themselves or using Dismember, which not all decks play. And, you know, at the end of the day, if they have to spend a card like Lightning Bolt on their own face in order to be able to, you know, play their Death Shadows, I think we're in a pretty good place, and that's been my experience historically. Like, the funny thing is, in the Grixis Shadow matchup, we're kind of the control deck with Obosh Red. So actually, I felt like we've been doing pretty well. And like, how does Ragavan and DRC changing the list? Well, actually, in the main deck, I actually feel like in game one, I should say, we might actually be a tad bit worse than we have been historically, simply because we actually don't want Dragon Rage Channeler to get Delirium, because we don't want to be forced to keep attacking. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to that. Sometimes, if they're low enough on life total, a 3/3 flying creature, will kill them. But sometimes when they're at a high enough life total, it's going to force us to drop their life total to the point where they can play Shadow for free, and it undermines our plan of trying to cut off their ability to drop their life total with Blood Moon. But that being said, Dragon Rage Channeler almost always comes out in games 2 and 3 against Shadow, and then we're basically back to basics. And Ragavan is another interesting story in that deck, because we're heavily incentivized to attack because of how much value we get from Ragavan, but at the same time we have to drop their life total by 2. I usually side Ragavan out so far, but obviously that could be a mistake. I'm less confident about that than about Dragon Rage Channeler. But at the end of the day, I just feel like the core cards that we play, the mainly Blood Moon and then Pillage in games 2 and 3, on some of their straggling basics. Another thing too is when you shut off their ability to play Shadow, or to at least play it on with 4 power or more, then you can relatively easily play around Stubborn Denial. So yeah, so I've been seeing Grixis Shadow. We seem to be doing pretty good against them. And then there's Is It Prowess. I have honestly never felt like I've had a better matchup against Is It Prowess than recently, when I've switched the deck over to Obot, just straight Obosh Hammer, Dragon Hammer Red, or whatever you want to call it. And I dropped the Prowess creatures, and most importantly, when I added Fury. So, yeah, I mean, when we have main deck Flame Slash and Fury, and even Hammer Bogarden, because the reality is Firebolt and two damage burn spells, they just almost never kill anything, because all their creatures, even now that they're playing Dragon Rage Channeler, that oftentimes comes down as the 3/3, so Firebolt doesn't kill it. Their Prowess creatures, they just have to flashback a Lava Dart or anything, and then they save their creature from a 2 damage burn spell. Storming Entity, like, it just has a natural base power and are stronger than 2. It's like, sometimes you can tag them with something like Firebolt, usually on turn 1, but like, yeah, let's just say like even Hammer Bogarden has been helping out a lot in Is It Prowess, because basically all my burn spells, except for like Pyrite Spellbomb or Stomp, basically do 3 or more damage. So most of our burn spells are pretty close to clean kill spells against most of their creatures, if not all. And now that we've got 8 4 damage creatures on 4 damage burn spells for creatures, Fury and Flame Slash, I've always felt like I felt like I have the last very few games to getting just juked out by their Storming Entity, and like, me just not being able to deal with it. Also, it's worth noting that when I first started playing against Is It Prowess in the earlier, like right before Modern Horizons 2 came out, I was actually getting a little concerned for a little while, because I started my win rate started to drop significantly. And here's the thing, okay? Historically, against Is It Prowess, I used to, I guess this is a little bit of a strategy guide too, now that I think about it. So I guess, I guess if you like that, this could be a good video for that purpose too. But yeah, so Is It Prowess, right before actually the Modern Horizons 2 metagame started, before Modern Horizons 2 came out, my win rate started dropping significantly, and I was actually getting concerned, because I was like, I don't know, what does this mean? Does this mean we should switch to Is It Prowess? Because, I heard this is a very good matchup in a lot of other matchups in the metagame. It seems super fast, super resilient. I'm like, I don't understand, like, what's going on? How come I was able to defeat them pretty easily in the past, but now it's like, then it started feeling like they started becoming really, really high powered. And, our win rate may have even dropped a bit below 50% for a while, so I was wondering what was going on. And I figured out what it was. It was it was them playing Expressive Iteration, and also some of them started playing Serum Visions. Like, they started upping their cantrip count, specifically blue high-powered cantrips, like, I don't know if like Serum Visions is like the mainstream version or not, but I will tell you, when I saw the Serum Visions versions, those ones could actually outgrind me, which was really weird because I mean I did have more high powered grind cards, but the thing is like with Serum Visions and with Expressive Iteration, they just never drew like more than 3 lands, and I couldn't complain anymore about that just being good luck, because that's because their cantrips just pushed all oh, and Dragon Rage Channeler too, when Modern Horizons 2 started coming out. Those cantrips just started pushing like all their lands relentlessly to the bottom. So like, they could pretty consistently just like stop on 3, maybe 4 lands max, an occasional Horizon land, and then crack it and ultimately end up with like 3, 4 lands max. And just when they were just drawing nothing but gas, I mean, even if they weren't necessarily like recurring Hammer of Garden constantly, or drawing 2 cards extra with a Seasoned Pyromancer, and sometimes I even saw some that did start playing Seasoned Pyromancer, although I don't know that those were the most scary versions, but so basically what happened is they really went higher up on the blue cantrips, and their deck became super gassy. They almost never ran out of gas. So what I actually realized, and I think I started realizing this even before Modern Horizons 2 came out, but Modern Horizons 2 really helped us pull ahead, I think, in the Is It Prowess matchup. What I started realizing was, wait a minute, okay, because I identified, I think the thing that changed is they're playing way more blue cantrips, like super high-powered blue cantrips, and even like a 2-for-1 cantrip. Like, Expressive Iteration is basically a 2-for-1 cantrip. I mean, it's a 2-for-1 card selection cantrip type spell. That's insane. It's card selection and it's card advantage. Like, I mean, so I'm calling it a blue cantrip, but a super high-powered blue cantrip at that. It's a blue-red cantrip, obviously, but yeah, so I identified that, yeah, I think that's what changed. I'm like, these blue cantrips are just insane. But then I also realized, wait a minute, like, they're playing so many blue cards now, and they don't seem to be playing a single basic island. Like, I see some lists once in every blue moon play a basic island. I still think the consensus is that playing a basic island is not where you want to be. And while part of me wants to criticize that, because obviously they would have a much better matchup with us, I don't know that they would necessarily, go to like having a winning matchup like I started feeling towards like, right before Modern Horizons 2 came out. However, I do think they would improve it significantly. Like right now, the Is It Prowess matchup, I don't want to say it feels like a bye, but it feels like we're maybe 70% favored, and maybe that's maybe that's a little bit unfair, and maybe like obviously I've been having a good luck streak against them as well. That's possible. But like I said, all those burn spells definitely help. But one of the main things actually is they've never been more weak to Blood Moon. Like they could play a basic island, but like I said, I think the consensus is they don't. And when they don't even play a single basic island to fetch, like, yeah, sure, they've got Manamorphos, but like one thing I started to notice is, yeah, they could get off like a random Storming Entity, or a random Expressive Iteration, or Serum Visions, or something here and there off of those Metamorphi, however you say plurally. They could get off with a few of them here and there, but like at the end of the day, I just felt like when I had a Blood Moon in play, they started stockpiling cards in their hand little by little as the game went on, and I can only imagine that those were blue cards they couldn't cast, and that's oftentimes how our deck really pulls far ahead. So yeah, and I can sympathize with not playing a single basic island, because I did play Red-White Prowess for a decent amount of time before switching back to Mono Red, which is where my heart kind of always was. But definitely before the companion nerf, you just can't. You just really couldn't justify not playing, strong white splash for Luris. And when I say strong white, I mean a lot of white sources, although I think some versions barely played any white cards. But but yeah, so basically um, I do feel like Is It Prowess is much better than it's ever been before, both because we have a lot more burn spells that deal 3 or more damage than we've ever played before. Some of which are new, like Fury. Some of which we just haven't played before, like Hammer of Garden. And also Blood Moon has never hosed them more. So do not skimp on the Blood Moons. I would probably keep 4 still in the deck. If they are playing a basic island, maybe you cut down to 2. I don't know, but I definitely think that like that was the mistake I was making when I was actually losing to Is It Prowess for a while, before Modern Horizons 2 came out. Is that my strategy before before basically Expressive Iteration came out and they started going way more heavily on blue cantrips, was that I always used to side out Blood Moon, or at least all. Sometimes I would side out all but one. Sometimes I would go down to 2 copies, but I would basically side out most, if not all, of my Blood Moons against them, and and I just realized that, like, wait a minute, I don't think they've ever been softer to Blood Moon. So when I started like leaving most of my copies of Blood Moon still in, I started realizing that my win rate started going back, and even I think above, what I was used to it being before. So, actually that's an important thing, an important lesson to learn with like when you're assessing your matchups, is like if suddenly a matchup is starting to become worse, it's good to ask yourself like what changed. You know what I mean? Like if and then if you realize what changed, sometimes you can attack that thing that changed, and and then that can help solve that problem that you're having. So yeah. So is it prowess? I feel like we're in pretty good shape against that deck. Green red Ponza. Okay, so I have been seeing green red Ponza a decent amount, but not like a ton. But I have been seeing it a decent amount. I think this matchup, frankly, has always been pretty even, and it still is pretty even. And I think I finally identified why that is. No matter how much I seem to like make certain changes here and there, the green red Ponza matchup always seems roughly even. Now, I've always liked to say I think that we're favored, but honestly, like it's close enough that I'm sure both of us feel we're favored because we both tend to prefer our own archetypes, the players of both archetypes. Um, prefer obviously. If you play mono red, you probably prefer mono red. If you play red green Ponza, you prefer red green Ponza. You probably think that is favored, and then if you play Obosh red, you probably think that's favored. But at the end of the day, I figured out why it always feels really close, and there just doesn't ever seem to be that much that changes that. And that is fundamentally that I realize it's almost the same deck. Like, yeah, they play green, and one reason why I kind of would like to believe we're at least somewhat favored is that like we never draw kind of air type cards like Utopia Sprawl later in the game, or even a Dryad Arbor later in the game. And even Dryad Arbor at least is a 1/1, but it's a pretty air type card late in the game. I mean, like even our 1-drops like Dragon Rage Channeler and Ragavan, even our 1-drops are actually pretty gassy and pretty like high octane, so to speak, later in the game. So we just don't really have like basically any air in our deck for the most part. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe Spike Fuel Hazard and Land are basically the only air cards, but with Hammer Bogarn, at least we've got some kind of recursion. Although I will say actually, if they didn't have Klothys, I think we probably would be very solidly favored because they wouldn't really be able to stop Hammer. But Klothys is a main deck way for them to very easily deal with Hammer, so Hammer is definitely not at its best against Ponza. So it mostly becomes a duel of who can draw more like Bone Crushers, who can draw more Seasoned Pyromancers, who can draw more Furies, because they started playing Fury too. um, yeah, like who draws more, I don't know, just incidental, just who basically floods out more. Like basically the matchup just comes down to who floods out more. I will say in games 2 and 3, bringing in Relic helps a lot. And sadly, I think, and I'm actually so conflicted at this point in the green-red Ponza matchup on what to do about the Dragon Rage Channelers, because on the one hand, if they don't have Klothys, that thing sometimes just turns into a 3/3 flyer and just runs away with the game, which is awesome. But then sometimes when they have Klothys, I can just never get Delirium, and then it just gets sniped by Ren and 6, and it doesn't do anything. I'm going to say that I think that I want to be cutting those for Relic of Progenitus. Obviously, I mean, most likely we want to be cutting those for Relic of Progenitus. That also helps manage Klothys, which we're not always able to really fully manage, there in our graveyard. But certainly, if you land Relic early in the game, you can minimize how big both graveyards get, particularly if you draw 2, so you can wipe one, and then the other one has a much smaller graveyard to mop up the pieces. So, yeah, that's it's green red Ponza. At the end of the day, like I said, it's very close to like the same deck, because like at the end of the day, we're both Bone Crusher decks, we're both Seasoned Pyromancer decks, and now we're both Fury decks. Like obviously they have some higher octane cards. Like obviously they have Bloodbraid Elf, and like we don't, but but then again they've got these airy cards like Dryad Arbor and Utopia Sprawl, which we don't too. So that's why it roughly evens out, because like if they draw nothing but they're like 2-for-1 Bloodbraid Elf type cards, and then they will actually kind of outgrind us, because they do actually, like I said, play more kind of 2-for-1s in their deck. On the other hand, though, if they draw more of their Utopia Sprawls and Arbor Elves, then oftentimes we'll win, because like our Seasoned Pyromancers, I mean our Dragon Rage Channelers, Ragavans, like like I said, we don't really have any air in the deck. But that being said, a lot of our, like, we don't necessarily play as many 2-for-1s, but we also don't play as many cards that are kind of very close to basically being dead cards late in the game either. So it kind of goes both ways. But yeah, that's why it's always a pretty even matchup. I wouldn't worry about it too much. If you're really losing to it consistently, then you may have to evaluate. If you're not playing Fury, I recommend you do so, because I think that they're going to have a huge advantage over you if they're playing Fury and you're not. Alright, so let's go to... So the next match I see on my list of decks that I faced is Amulet Titan. Once again, I feel like Amulet Titan... Yeah, actually, I realized this video is taking a while, so this might actually only be... I might only be able to cover red deck wins. And that might actually give me the ability to do a video like this every week, because if I just cover other decks... I don't know that that there's going to be like a massive shift in just like 1 week or something, and sometimes there might be, but in any case, yeah, this video might actually turn out to be mostly just red deck wins, Obosh Red, you know. So Amulet Titan, where are we at with Amulet Titan? And also let me know, like, this is the first time I'm doing a video like this, so if this is just not working for you all, with me basically kind of explaining where we're at by like going over at least like a sample of the decks I faced, just let me know. Yeah, and I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit too, because obviously 20 minutes and we're only going for 4 decks. But, so yeah, Amulet Titan. So where are we at with this deck? Again, I think this deck, like, we've almost never had a better matchup. In fact, so much so that I feel like I can cut from 8 sideboard moon effects to 6. Sometimes they'll get us, because sometimes, those extra 2 could make a difference. But at the end of the day, the main thing here is that I'm able to stick a turn 2 Blood Moon much more often. I mean, yeah, sometimes they've got a Boreal Grazer, but here's the thing. I mean, we've got 4 Lightning Bolts and 4 Flame Slashes. A lot of times we can burn that out of the way and then connect with Ragavan. And like, yeah, that means we can't stick a turn 2 Blood Moon, but when we're connecting with Ragavan every turn, we're ultimately able to get Blood Moon down either earlier, or we're able to get it down while also accumulating more mana, and most importantly, we're able to get Obosh down earlier, which is huge, because with Obosh in play, almost all our burn spells in the deck actually one-shot a Titan, which means, even if they manage to get, which a lot of times they do, even if they're able to get 2 basics and able to cast Titan. Sometimes they actually win with Titan even when their lands don't do anything, because yeah, sometimes a 6/6 Trampler will just get you. But but since Ragavan helps us get to Obosh much faster, like it helps us get to Blood Moon faster, and even like then, like even if they are able to land a Titan under Blood Moon, like since we can one-shot their Titan pretty easily, if an Obosh is in play, which we can get done early because of Ragavan, it just means that we don't get randomly hosed out by just multiple. Sometimes they can still pack, and sometimes they get like an army of Titans that just aren't actually getting utility from the lands, but are still attacking us for 6. And let's just say Ragavan just helps in all aspects. And maybe there are some versions that can't deal with a Boreal Grazer, but we play Lightning Bolt and Flame Slash in the main, and Fury for that matter. So like honestly, getting past the Boreal Grazer is not that big of a deal. We can basically attack almost every turn for the most part uninterrupted. They won't even always have a Boreal Grazer, and sometimes that's just really bad for them. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Amulet Titan can still win, and I have still lost at least 1 game, maybe just 1 game since since Modern Horizons 2 came out, or at least ever since I started doing Ragavan and Dragon Rage Channeler, because I don't think I immediately switched. But definitely since I've been playing this recent list, I'm not even sure that I have lost a single match against Amulet Titan. No, actually, I just remembered, I did lose 1. Yeah, I mean, I played many games against them, and yeah, I'm at least like 4 or 5 to 1, and probably more. So we'll see. But yeah, I feel like I'm in a good place with Amulet Titan. And I have been seeing Amulet Titan. I've actually been seeing Amulet Titan a bit more than Red Green Ponza. A little bit less than Is It Prowess, but definitely more than Red Green Ponza. Maybe a little bit less than Shadow too, but it's probably very close to how often I see Shadow. I do see this deck still running around, and I do think that we've got the tools to deal with it, which is good. Okay, Timur Waterfall. So this is kind of a little bit of a boogeyman. So, I actually feel like I'm somewhat even against this deck. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, I may have actually lost slightly more games against this deck than I've won. It does feel beatable, but man, when they're firing on all cylinders, they're putting 10 power in play on turn 3, or they're end of turn putting putting 8 power worth of Rhinos into play, and they're subtletying your creatures like Seasoned Pyromancer, and they're force negationing your spells like Flame Slash on their Rhino tokens. Like when they're firing on all cylinders, it can just feel like impossible to keep up. On the other hand, they do dirtle sometimes, and they do sometimes, like, you know, like, if they don't actually draw a lot of their cascade spells, also like hard casting, I mean, suspending crashing footfalls oftentimes is a bit slow. So, like, if they have one of the clunkier hands, I think they're very beatable. But if they're firing on all cylinders, that can be pretty tough. But that being said, I mean, their deck is not super consistent. After all, they can't play any true 1 or 2 mana cards. They do have a lot of strong options to choose from, though, and that's what makes the deck scary. But they aren't playing a lot of super high-powered cantrips or anything like that. So, like, they do have like at least 8 cascade spells, which is a lot. But yeah, at the end of the day, they don't have like a ton of card selection, so the deck does sometimes kind of like float out, does sometimes kind of dirtle a bit. It's not. It doesn't always fire on all cylinders, so put it that way. And here's another thing too, like, even if they're drawing a bunch of cascade spells, if they don't have force negation against us, I think a lot of times we're still in pretty decent shape. And sometimes Blood Moon jukes them too, so there's that. I wish I could say more about the Timor Waterfalls matchup. I mean, I suppose if it ever becomes a real big problem, we could jam Chalice in our sideboard, which is weird because usually Chalice is a card used against us. We could also Chalice actually would shut off Obosh, so maybe that's not the best version. Yeah, I don't know. There's not a lot of good token or I don't know. Like, honestly, if this ever becomes a problem, Obosh Red just might not be the best build. To do, there could be like an Obosh less similar type red card. One card I've actually been kind of itching to try if I ever go off Obosh in a similar red mid-range deck that just doesn't have Obosh is Flametongue Yearling. I think Flametongue Yearling might be a severely underrated card. I mean, think about it. It's a 2-mana 2/1. It's a 2-mana 2-for-1. Like, I think a good chunk of time you're going to play it for 2 mana and you're going to snipe something that's, like, you can snipe a Stoneforge Mystic, you can snipe a lot of stuff. You can snipe a Dragonmace Channeler before it does Delirium. You can snipe a Delver. You could snipe a Ragavan. I mean, Flametongue Yearling might be a really slept-on card, and I'm a little bit kind of itching to maybe give that a try. But obviously, I can't do that in an Obosh build. But, like, yeah, and its downside though is it's not super aggressive, and it's so super mid-rangey. But, like, obviously we're going in a mid-range direction anyway, so I don't know. If anybody wants to give that a try, they completely have my blessing. And then obviously that also opens up, Mishra's Bauble to make the Dragonmace Channelers better. That also opens up Chalice if you really need it in the sideboard for the Cascade decks, or Ratchet. That also opens up Ratchet Bomb, like one of the best all-purpose, removal. It's honestly a little scary though, because like I've spent so much time kind of perfecting what I think is like the best sideboard and the best main deck for this Obosh version. Like, it opens up a lot of possibilities, but it also will force a lot of cuts, so it cuts. It's a two-way street that cuts both ways. In any case, I'm still on Obosh for now, and there's absolutely no reason for me to switch from it right now, since I've been doing just pretty darn good. So that's where Timor Waterfalls is at, and I do see this deck a lot. I think I see this deck just slightly less than Izzet Prowess. But yeah, I run into this deck a decent amount. Well, yeah, it's weird. Maybe actually, I'm going to revise that. Maybe I see this deck about the same, a little bit more than Amulet Titan. Yeah, the metagame's all over the place, actually, because even Izzet Prowess I don't see like every single league. Anyway, let's go on. Green Tron. Okay, you know what's weird, actually, against Green Tron? I think I've been having some difficulty with Green Tron if you've been following my Twitter tweets with my like league results. And I haven't like posted every single one because some of these leagues, like how can I say? Like, I don't know that I posted this one here that I'm looking at: Bant, Stoneblade, Red Black Shadow, Mono Black Reanimator, Domain Zoo, Blue White Control. There was probably something about the list. Like, I remember some of them. Like, for example, I remember one list. I tried playing like 8 fetch lands, and that was just like I was just losing a lot of games to losing too much life, for example. So it didn't seem, Anyway, but anyway, so that's neither here nor there. So like, I'm looking at one league where I lost 0-2 to Tron. That sucked. This one was a 4-1 league though, so I did bring it back with the next 4. But Green Tron. Okay, I actually do think that we may actually be slightly favored against Green Tron. And in a way, we have some improvements, because Ragavan does help us get turn 2 Blood Moon. But here's the thing, though. Like, when I'm losing games to Greentron, I'm usually losing them because I'm not killing them fast enough, and they curve out under Blood Moon, and they start playing Wormcoil engines. We do have Spikefield Hazard, though, and, like, I'm not sure how many... Like, I know a lot of these leagues I'm looking at with the results, they don't, they were pre-Spikefield Hazard. Spikefield Hazard helps a lot, but the problem is I don't have any burn spells to deal 5 damage. So you end up having to Spikefield Hazard, play like Flame Slash, and then waste some other burn spell in order to be able to deal with it. That's oftentimes worth it, but then it still gets a lot of value for them. So at the end of the day, with Greentron, like, yeah, if we have Ragavan plus Blood Moon, there's a good chance we're going to win, because Ragavan does dish out a lot of damage. Oh yeah, also once I think I played their Wormcoil engine off their top, off of Ragavan, when I started accumulating, you know, my treasure tokens. that was fun. Yeah, playing their Wormcoil engine, that's a sweet feeling, but that doesn't happen all the time. And yeah, so at the end of the day, I think Greentron is still probably roughly in the even territory. It might even be slightly favored, but it's definitely not the heyday where I felt like I've had the best matchup in some previous builds. Here's the secret: if you want to beat Tron, like, I think red blue prowess actually probably has the best Tron matchup out of all the prowess decks, which is weird because they don't play Blood Moon. But here's a dirty little secret about Tron. The reason why Tron doesn't necessarily get hated out by the Blood Moon decks is that most of the Blood Moon decks are intrinsically more mid-rangey. The best way you beat Tron is you basically just win before turn 3, or you put them so low on life that you can easily finish them off with burn. You know, after they start dropping Wormcoils, after they start dropping Oblivion Stones. You know what I mean? Like, if you can either finish them off before turn 3 or drop their life total low enough, then like, that's actually the best. That's actually the best against Tron, not Blood Moon. Blood Moon is great, but like, and yeah, like, probably blue-red prowess with like a basic island somewhere in the mix, and with sideboard Blood Moons. Yeah, that's probably just hell on wheels. Tron might as well probably just pack it up against that. But at the end of the day, the reason why Tron is packing it up against a deck like that isn't because of the Blood Moons. The Blood Moons oftentimes just seal the deal, but like, it's really just because the decks that just dish out so much damage so quickly, that's the problem for Tron. All of that is to say, though, that we're not cold to Tron, but we're also, you know, classic green Tron. It's also just it can also be a little challenging too. So yeah, there are ways we could build the deck differently, but where we're at now with Tron, I feel okay. I think it's acceptable. I'm not looking forward to seeing this. Like, if I'm like in a big tournament and my first opponent, you know, my first opponent leads off with Urza's Tower, I'm not super thrilled. And the main reason I'm actually not super thrilled is that it's E-Tron, which is still not a good matchup. There's just nothing we can do about that. Maybe Obsidian Charmaw somehow in the sideboard has to come in if that ever becomes a menace. But that seems to be being hated out by the rest of the format, I guess, or something. But yeah, the main reason is because of E-Tron. But secondarily speaking, Greentron is also not like anything to sneeze at either. Okay, Green-White Heliod, I see this deck. I've also faced in like the last few weeks. It's hard to say like how much things have changed because of Modern Horizons. I will say that this game that I'm looking at, that I 2-1 Heliod, I basically beat Heliod the only way I ever beat Heliod. Is basically I juke them with Blood Moon, and then I pillage their Utopia Sprawled Forest. So yeah, I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, there's Rampaging Ferocidon, there's Leyline of Punishment, there's all kinds of creative ways you can try to beat the Heliod deck, but I found the most consistent way for me to steal games, and I do still stand by it being a bad matchup. I don't think there's any amount of sideboard cards you can play that'll flip it into a good matchup, but the only like way I found myself to push myself to maybe like a 40% win rate or something like that against Green White Heliod is basically I just juke him out with Blood Moon, and then I juke him out with Pillage. Like, that must be insanely frustrating against them, and I've gotten a lot of complaints from the opponent that like they have like a ton of basic forests and plains, and they do. The problem is that they have to draw them and not the other half of their deck. That's basically fetch lands that go fetch them, and the Horizon Canopies, and the Gavany Townships, and the and the Pendle Havens, and the I think they play some check lands too, if I'm not mistaken. Like, about half of their deck, at least half of their deck, if not more, is non-basics, and they do play probably at least like 4 to 8 basics. 4 is probably absolute minimum number. I don't think 4. They probably play 6 to 8 basics, realistically, which is, you know, a solid like 40% of their like mana base is basics. So like, it must be insanely frustrating to get juked by Blood Moon against that deck, because because obviously they do have basics to work with, and sometimes you can't juke them because they do draw enough basics. But enough of their deck is non-basics that that it happens more than they probably like to believe, that they just don't have a lot of colored sources and they get locked under Blood Moon. Anyway, long story short, I've barely seen Heliod at all. My understanding is getting hated out of the format. It is comforting that one of the few times I've run into Heliod, I did manage to beat it. But this was always one of my biggest thorn in the side decks. This and E-Tron always, like, man, if I had a nickel for every time Green White Heliod or E-Tron ended a 5-0 run, well, I don't know if I'd have $1 or not, but I definitely have a lot of nickels. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have $1. It's insane, like having like a, well, I guess $1 would be, what, 5 cents times that would be 50. No, not 50. Let's see, if it was 10 cents, then that would be 10 times, and if it's 5 cents, then it'd be 20 times. Yeah, actually, it could be. No, I don't think so. I think that's still a little too high. So I probably wouldn't have $1, but I might have 50 cents if I had a nickel for every time these block me from a 5-0 run. In any case, yeah, even that might be a little high, but yeah, you get the point. Yeah, so let's see here. Timur Midrange. I don't really see much of this deck anymore. I don't know if there's much to say. I think basically all of these types, like there was, for a while I was seeing some decks playing Unholy Heat, Tarmogoyf, Dragon Rage Channeler, etc. I think most of these decks have basically just moved on to being pure blue-red, Delver-ish type decks. Murktide Regent, that's what happened. I think people started to realize Murktide Regent was probably just better than Tarmogoyf and they didn't need to splash green. Yeah, so I just don't see this deck much anymore, because I think it moved in 2 directions. Probably some of these players just moved on to 2 more Waterfalls, or Rhino Falls, whatever you want to call it, and probably other of them just moved on to, the ones who wanted to stay Timur probably just moved to Waterfalls, and the one who wanted to actually make the core of, like, the cards in that deck work probably moved on to the blue-red Murktide Channeler, whatever decks. Okay, humans. Man, humans. Oh, I feel sorry for humans against us. Now, humans actually might be pretty well positioned in the metagame. I think that there's a lot to like about humans, for example, against like a lot of the Cascade decks, because they usually only play one card they're cascading into, so they can play Meddling Mage on like Crashing Footfalls or Glimpse of Tomorrow or whatever it's called, and then yeah, they can try to like Dead Gone it or something, but then they can like drop a Thales Lieutenant in play. Or they can take the removal away with High Self Rebooter. Like, there's a lot to like about humans in this format for sure. So I don't say this as any disrespect to humans. I think the reason why we're seeing it more is because it has a lot of strong options against what's going on right now. But man, it just so happens that kind of like Is It Prowess, we've never been set up better to deal with them. Especially now that we have Fury. Like, yeah, man, the number of times that I just like I light up the board and take like 2 or 3 creatures down with a Fury, it's just it just feels a little dirty, to be honest. Like, oftentimes they just can't come back. And yeah, sometimes they still overwhelm me. But I mean, I'm looking at a 2-0 result I had just right here, and I just remember this. And I think the opponent just quit after I 3 for 2'd him with Fury. I think under a Blood Moon too. So like, yeah. Yeah, Fury really is the missing piece of the puzzle against humans. Humans could still juke us pretty easily, actually. Like, I don't even know if it technically counts as juking if they're really juking very often. But the crazy thing is, even when I had like a ton of removal against humans, they could still just like rush you pretty easily. Like, if they just drop a bunch of humans and play off of multiple Aether Vials, yeah, you could drop a Blood Moon, but like sometimes by the time you drew Blood Moon, you were already facing lethal attacks. So you'd have to spend most of your turns burning up all the creatures before deploying Blood Moon. And by the time you drew Blood Moon, like, sometimes you would win, but by the time you deployed Blood Moon, oftentimes you won because you burned all their creatures, not because you dropped the Blood Moon. You know what I mean? But man, Fury changes all of that, because Fury makes Blood Moon so much better. Now, how does that work? Well, first of all, if you have multiples, you can pitch like an extra Blood Moon. That's huge. That's nice. You could already do that with Seasoned Pyromancer, but it feels extra sweet when you're doing it for free and getting sometimes equivalent amount of value, or even better, because instead of drawing the cards, you're just actually directly affecting their board. But really, what Fury enables you to do is you don't have to take a turn off to play Blood Moon necessarily. I mean, you have to tap 3 mana, but the same turn you deploy Blood Moon, you can also kill like 2 to 3 of their creatures. That's insane. That's basically the missing piece. You can deploy Blood Moon, like prevent them from playing more stuff while also clearing their board. Like, that's really, in my opinion, that's really what humans probably sweats bullets when they're facing. like, you know, Fury, like Blood Moon and Fury working together. Blood Moon alone, like they could actually rush you. When you have to take off three mana and one entire turn to deploy your Blood Moon, you know, that gives them their opportunity to just like to try to overrun you right there. But when you also have the ability to wipe 2 to 3 creatures for free, ooh, you know, that's where things can get scary for them. So yeah, humans. I kind of, you know, no offense to humans decks, but I kind of want to see those all day, every day, if I had the choice. It is, and I really love the humans archetype. So, you know, yeah, it pains me a little bit to say, but yeah, humans is probably humans, if not our best matchup, is probably definitely one of our best matchups. Okay, so, you know, Bant Stoneblade, yeah, this deck can be kind of tricky, but I haven't played it a ton. I think I've only played it once or twice, and I think it beat me both times, so I'm not really sure what to say about it. Sometimes that Tokai Squirrel thingy is like a problem. I used to be able to deal with that with a Soulscar Mage, because it had Indestructible, but now I can't. I mean, you could try to set up blockers, but like, you know, but at the end of the day, Bant Stoneblade is a weird deck, because, oh, you know what it is? It's that frickin', um, Shattering Revelation? What's it called again? Prismatic Ending. That's it. It's a Prismatic Ending. That card really helped Bant Stoneblade a lot, because that gives them kind of like a pseudo lightning bolt, at least against our 1-drops. Yeah, that's huge for them. Like, but and again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, because there's really not much I think I can say about Stoneblade, because I've only played it like maybe once or twice, I think, in like the last 2-3 weeks. It was a little discouraging that I think both times I played it I lost, but you know, it is what it is. Sometimes like any Stoneforge deck can get you if you don't have your Furies or Flame Slash for their Batter Skulls, you know, on turn 5 or so. If you somehow don't have burn spells, and believe it or not, this happens, even though you've got so many burn spells, it's hard to believe. But like, yeah, sometimes if you just somehow don't have burn spells to deal with their Stoneforge, like, you know, there's ways it gets you. And I have a memory of these decks just being kind of like, somehow I got. And I mean, it's very possible it's a bad matchup, but it's also possible that I just don't have a large enough sample size. You know, I mean, it works both ways. Like, we have to give ourselves a little dose of humility sometimes if we're just trashing a deck. Although I do think, since both on a conceptual level and based on my results I've had so far, I do think it's safe to say that humans is a pretty good matchup. But, you know, things could change. There could be some new card that changes that dynamic or something like that. It's always the game always goes on, so to speak. So Red Black Shadow. You know, oh yeah, and I forgot to mention. Yeah, I forgot to mention. What is it called? Yeah, humans I see more of. Yeah, I forgot to mention that I do see a lot of humans, which I do like. I wish I saw more of it, but yeah, I do see them a lot. And actually, I seem to have missed blue-white control here when I'm looking at decks that I've faced. So, yeah, blue-white control. Okay, Prismatic Ending, big upgrade, helps them out a lot. I'm not kidding you guys. This is actually where Hammer of a Garden really shined for me, because I'm looking at this. I got a 2-0 against Blue White Control, and my memory is both of those games I won by constantly recurring Hammer of a Garden. And I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, Force Negation, doesn't that stop Hammer of a Garden cold? Yeah, except I remember them using that on an early Blood Moon. So my recommendation is just jam an early Blood Moon. You know what I mean? Because here's the thing: if you wait against Blue White Control with Blood Moon, if they get like 3 islands, if they get 3 islands in 1 plains, it almost doesn't do anything. It still does do something though, because it still shuts off Supreme Verdict, which costs 2 white. Although a lot of these are playing Terminus now, so they might not even strictly need 2 white. Although they'll need 2 white if they hardcast a Terminus, which happens more than you might think. In any case, if you deploy Blood Moon early enough, like here, so I would recommend keeping Blood Moon in. I think people make a big mistake of assuming Blood Moon is a dead card against Blue-White Control. It's not. First of all, it always shuts down their utility lands, like Celestial Colonnade, and nowadays they're playing Urza too, so you shut down Urza. That's huge. That's huge, because not only do you shut Urza down, but it doesn't even tap for colorless. It just goes directly to their graveyard. So yeah, so that alone is probably good enough reason to play Blood Moon. But even before they were playing Urza, I mean, it always shuts down their Celestial Colonnades. A lot of them are playing like a 1 or 2 of Castle Vantress and a 1 or 2 of Castle Ardenvale. Probably a 1 of each, but like, you know, playing 1 of each of those cards even, like, still they'll see it a decent amount of time. You shut both of those off from Blood Moon. But here's the other thing too. If you can deploy Blood Moon at any time before they've fetched 3 islands, you shut off Cryptic Command. Shutting off Cryptic Command is huge. I want to shout it from the mountaintop. Do not underestimate how important preventing them from casting Cryptic Command is. Cryptic Command is their marquee counterspell. It's their best and most important piece of card advantage. Yes, even more so than their Planeswalkers, because you can actually deal with the Planeswalkers. Like, other than Blood Moon, you can't stop a Cryptic Command. We don't have counter magic of our own. It can bounce our Blood Moons. It can bounce our Obosh, but it can counter Obosh. It can counter Seasoned Pyromancer. Like, it can stop us from attacking for lethal. Like, Cryptic Command is the marquee card for blue-white control, and if you can cut them off with 3 blue, that alone, I think some players assume that if their blue-white control has 2 blue mana, then their Blood Moon doesn't do anything. I'm telling you right now, not at all. They will, you know, they are kicking themselves, feeling like really frustrated when they have a Cryptic Command in their hand that they can't play. Trust me. You know, if they only have 2 blue mana and they have a Cryptic Command in hand, that's not a good feeling. And also, even with 3 blue mana, it's still not completely irrelevant because they can't actually Cryptic Command. They can't snap Cryptic. Yeah, if they only have 3 blue mana, they can Cryptic once, but a lot of the value of Cryptic comes from being able to snap Cryptic. Snap Cryptic is just disgusting in terms of like card advantage, and in terms of just like value. So, you know, but obviously where you really want to be is you want to cut them off of being able to get to 3 islands. And like I said, sometimes cutting them off of 2 planes or cutting them off of any white mana is also huge, because that turns off their ability to Prismatic Omen the Blood Moon away. I will say Blood Moon definitely doesn't stick as often as it did before, though, because of Prismatic Omen. But I think what happened in these blue-white control decks is I just kind of went for sticking a Blood Moon. I didn't do my classic trying to like play around it and stuff, which I usually didn't do against blue-white control anyway, because they have the least colors of basically any control deck. But yeah, like if you try to stick enough early Blood Moons, if you try to, I guess that's mostly it, because I don't think any of our other spells are really all that threatening. We don't play Light Up the Stage anymore, which also used to be a good target for Force Negation. But yeah, so like, basically if you, no, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, basically, they don't, let's put it this way, they don't always have Force Negation. Even though they do oftentimes play 4 of them. Sometimes they use them on a couple early Blood Moons. Sometimes you draw more hammers than they draw more Force Negations. I just remember against these blue-white control decks, like, I just kept playing hammer again, and again, and again. It helped me deal with their Planeswalkers. It helped me deal with some creatures that I think they brought in. I think in the sideboard game they might have brought in, you know, that prowess monastery mentor or whatever it's called. Yeah, it helps deal with any creatures they bring in. It helps deal with their Planeswalkers, and ultimately, Hammer helps deal with them. Like, it was insane. Like, and honestly, this was one of my earlier matches I had here. I think like how good this was against blue-white control is one of the reasons why I started to become really, really convinced that Hammer might just be more than a meme. So yeah, ultimately, I think blue-white control is a good matchup. Although I will admit that it might have been lucky that I was curving out pretty well. And that I was drawing more hammers than they had Force Negations, which, by the way, is another advantage to having more than 1 hammer, because like, as long as you draw 1 more hammer than they draw Force Negation, sometimes they don't really have a way to ultimately deal with recurring hammers. So the game, even if they drag the game out insanely long, you will, if you're hammering them or their creatures or their Planeswalkers every single turn. Oh, I think I even went to time in one of these, if I remember correctly, because I it just helped so much dealing with their Planeswalkers. They couldn't really like solidify anything. Yeah, I don't know what to say other than just it's insane. Yeah, I think the only time I decked them, I remember I decked them in one game. That's never happened before I played Hammer. They literally decked out. So anyway, yeah. So I like that matchup, but I'll admit that there probably was some element of good luck there too. So maybe we need a bigger sample size. Red Black Shadow, kind of similar to Grixis. Definitely don't take those Blood Moons out. Yeah, I did get a 2-0 and probably more, but like, yeah, I like the red. Yeah, I'm not going to say too much more about this because it's mostly the same. It's mostly the same commentary as I had on Grixis Shadow, except that it's harder to completely color screw them out of the game. But on the other hand, if you stick a early Blood Moon and they can't reduce their life total, it's also likewise kind of hard for them, because then you just keep playing Seasoned Pyromancers. You just eventually try to stick Obosh. You basically try to build up a huge board and try to kill them in like 1 or 2 swings, and you know, that can be a problem for them too. And after sideboard, when you bring in the Pillages, sometimes you can actually color screw them because they actually don't play that many swamps. They're not always relentlessly trying to fetch swamps every time they fetch, and if they only fetch 1 or 2 swamps, you know, sometimes if you draw 1 or 2 pillages after your Blood Moon, then that's just that, you know. Anyway, so but Red Black Shadow, this is scarier than Grixis Shadow, and they have beaten me. You know, sometimes they beat me in the past, but I think we're relatively favored. We do see this a decent amount. Well, I shouldn't say decent amount. We see this, I think, less than Grixis Shadow, but like Shadow, we see this a decent amount, and I think we're probably 60-ish% favored. Yeah, blue-white control. Also, you don't see blue-white control that much. I don't know what to say, but control decks in general, yeah, you see those pretty often. And I do think our deck has a pretty good control matchup, so you know, there's that. Oh yeah, and I see I have another 2-0 against blue-white control here, so it goes to show that you know, more evidence that I think I can feel pretty relatively confident about that matchup. Yeah, taxes. I like. I think taxes kind of like Bant Stoneblade. This matchup can kind of go both ways. I can't fully explain why, but I seem to have better results here that I'm looking at against taxes than I did against Bant Stoneblade. Again, a lot of that could be the luck of the draw. I don't necessarily want to say too much more about taxes because I think a lot of it is kind of a lot of the problem cards in taxes for us basically are common or similar at least. Like, yeah, a lot of the cards that are problem for us in taxes are similar to the cards that are problem for us in Bant Stoneblade. Just for whatever reason, I've been having better luck against taxes these leagues. So, you know, that's another reason why I don't know that I can necessarily comment too convincingly on either one of these. But definitely, taxes can get us, but we can definitely get taxes. It's a tricky matchup too, and probably one of the few matchups that there's a lot of skill-intensive decisions that probably the player who's playing it makes one of the bigger differences in how the result's going to go. So it may not necessarily always. There are some class of decks that it's not necessarily just like Battleship or something where it's just like, you know, ramming the. I don't know, maybe the Battleship's not the right word, but it's not just like. It's not just like two like you know, die spinning things clashing with each other. Sometimes there is. Sometimes, like, it's not so much that the deck has a good matchup as much as it is that in the hands of a good player it can be a problem. But it might be more the player that's actually causing the problem. So anyway, yeah, another 2-1 against Red Green Panza. The Timur Glimpse. Yeah, Timur Glimpse. I think I've been getting insanely lucky against it. They somehow seem to have been folding to Blood Moon plus Pillage, but I think that's probably a bad matchup. In any case, I'm not going to say too much more about Timur Glimpse. Other than that, they're a combo deck. The saving grace to Timur Glimpse is that they can't always combo off on turn 3 because if they don't have their Sea Sift or whatever it's called, like if they're just rolling the dice on on shifting 3 permanents, that's not necessarily enough to combo off. If they have Kalani Garden, okay, great, they have 4. But it's really that Shifter card that allows them to have 5 permanents to play. That's where they might be able to do something. In any case, I think this matchup might be a bad matchup, but not as bad as like Heliod or Etron. I think probably it's like a 45% bad matchup. But anyway, Domain Zoo. I've had good luck against this deck. Basically, if you don't have Blood Moon, they roll you, and if you do, you roll them. I don't know what else to say. Just prioritize the hands with Blood Moon very very diligently, and just go from there, because their creatures are just humongous without Blood Moon. Yeah, and especially if they're playing Tarmogoyf, yeah, Relic can also help, shrink the Goyfs. But yeah, prioritize those Blood Moons very heavily, because suddenly Territorial Kavu is really nothing all that special if you land a Blood Moon. Izzet Delver. I also have had good success against Izzet Delver. I originally wanted to say that this was a great matchup, just like Izzet Prowess, but I do think this one's a little bit trickier because they do have some main deck counter magic from Counterspell. That being said, yeah, and Murktide Regent could be a little bit of a problem too, if they get to it. Not gonna lie, that can grow really large and can be a little bit of a problem to finish off. But the thing is, with Fury and Flame Slash, I think I've Furied and Flame Slashed an 8/8 Regent before. Not exactly the cool, or maybe double Flame Slash too is a possibility, but yeah, like with Flame Slash and Fury combining together, it's not impossible to deal with the Regent. And for whatever reason, I 2-0'd this Izzet Delver. I call these decks Izzet Delver, but I can't guarantee you that all of them actually had Delver. I just call them Delver because they're different than Prowess, and They basically play like the Delver decks of old. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Regent makes me have pause about really declaring this a good matchup. I just will say that so far, the times I've run into it, I just like Is It Prowess, I have been able to light up the early creatures with Fury. I have been able to Blood Moon comes out in this matchup because unlike Is It Delver, they play a ton of islands. I mean, unlike Is It Prowess. Yeah, but anyway, I don't know what to say other than that. If they don't overrun you with regents, and I think Relic Progenitus helps out a lot there. Anyway, yeah, so far I've been having decent luck against it, but I'm going to withhold judgment on that. Yeah, and here's my 8 fetch land league that was just like a failed experiment. I don't know if we can glean too much about that. Don't do 8 fetch lands. You take way too much damage, and for nothing really. Ultimately, you only need 4. You may not even need 4 to be honest, but because you can a lot of times you're just surveilling the lands to the bottom with Dragon Race Channeler anyway. But 4 seems decent. Again, I 2-1 to Glimpse deck. Not sure what to say there. I think there was definitely an element of good luck. Affinity is Affinity can go both ways. Affinity has ended some runs, but Affinity also sometimes you just clear their board with Fury. Like Fury, if it wasn't for Fury, I think Affinity would be a terrible matchup. But Fury single-handedly might make us slightly favored. It at least makes it roughly even. I really don't know much more to say other than that. I would recommend in the Affinity matchup, prioritize trying to clear their creatures as much as possible, because this is something I picked up from like old school Affinity back in the day, even before like it started becoming a huge modern thing. The best way to beat Affinity is you have to slow them down, and one of the ways you can slow them down is if you try to like kill all their artifact creatures on site as much as possible, because that reduces their affinity count, which in turn means they have to spend more mana on their thought casts and their thought monitors, which in turn means that they can't play more creatures that turn, which in turn means they can't snowball into more, thought casts and thought monitors, and you get the idea. And yeah, like eventually they do draw a lot of cards, but if you can slow them down, sometimes you can Fury them, you can Fury again, Season Pyromancer draw more cards. Like you can keep up with them if you slow them down. So I'm still not ready to declare this a good matchup, but if you're prioritizing slowing them down as much as possible, they're definitely very beatable. Blue-White Spirit, same as humans. Fury helps this matchup so enormously. I can't even say. Since so many of their creatures have flash, though, it's a little bit less helpful than against humans. But let's just say we're not as and also it gets around Mausoleum Wanderer. I think Spirit is a good deck that you have to respect. Oh yeah, and they also can't Spell Queller Fury. Yeah. Fury is just the nut, so to speak, against Spirits. I do think this is a good matchup. I don't think it's as good as humans. I don't think it's even as close to as good as humans. But I think this is probably like a 60%-ish, 55. Yeah, I think it's a 60%-ish matchup. Good matchup. I mean, humans is probably like an 80% matchup. And probably that sounds like an exaggeration, but it's just been really good for me so far. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, Spirits is not that. Spirits is probably like a 60% matchup. They can still get you, but Fury just gives you like, yeah, Fury gives you a lot of the power, so to speak, in the matchup. Yeah, another 2-0 against Prowess. Green-White Stoneblade, I got a 2-0 against that. And you see, like, I don't know that I can say there's that much of a difference between this and the Taxes or the Bant Stoneblade deck. I don't know. Yeah, somehow I think my Stoneblade results have been a little bit all over the place. Honestly, if it wasn't for a few of these losses against the Bant Stoneblade decks, I mean, I might not have necessarily thought too much of it, and I might have just thought like, oh, this is an easy matchup. But whatever. As of right now, they seem to go both ways for some mysterious reason. So Merfolk. So this is an interesting one. So I actually do have a 2-1 here that from my results with Merfolk, but actually I think before I started I started like this more recent version without the prowess creatures, I did actually get beat by a Merfolk deck, and I do think that that Merfolk is actually better positioned than it's been in a long time against us. That being said, we also have more tools to deal with some of their difficult threats. Like basically, Civilian is one of their main you know, one of the main avenues to victory. Like, and we know that from playing Merfolk ourselves. That being said, with 4 Flame Slash and 4 Fury, it's never really that big of a concern. Now recently Merfolk has started to adopt main deck Chalice, and I'm a little bit jealous that seems to have happened without my input, because I'm Mr. Main Deck Chalice. But it looks like the community is kind of going towards main deck Chalice without me leading the way, and I might have to follow along if it really is doing that well. And that will definitely make the matchup harder, but this deck plays fewer 1-drops than any of their previous versions. But that being said, Chalice is still never a nice thing to see, so yeah. So, but at the end of the day, I still think Merfolk is a favorable matchup. It's just that I'm not sure how the Chalice will affect it, but I still won more than I lost for sure. But it was just surprising that a Merfolk deck got me that one time when I ran out of burn spells to deal with Sphelin. I may not have had, I don't think I had Fury in that match though. Fury helps a lot. Anyway, Mardu, Death Shadow, same as other Death Shadow. There's really not much that I can say about the white that really changes things. Bant Stoneblade, yeah, here's my other loss against Bant Stoneblade. Not really so much, not sure how much I can say about that. I've already talked a lot about it. Blue-White Control, yeah, this is a loss against Blue-White Control, 1-2. You know, like it's this, like I said, this isn't a matchup that you're going to win every single time. Sometimes they can force and negate all your Hammer of Gardens, and sometimes they, you know, sometimes they counter your stuff, and you know what I mean, like it can go both ways. Red White Burn, 2-0. This was largely because of Radiant Fountain, I don't know what else to say. For all the doubters in Radiant Fountain, like, I don't know how many 4-1s would have been 3-2s and how many 5-0s would have been 4-1s if it wasn't for those Radiant Fountains shoring up that burn matchup like really no other card ever has for me. I don't know what to say. Yeah, I got 2 more wins against Merfolk, Simic and Mono Blue. Ad Nauseam, I juked an Ad Nauseam player with Blood Moon and got a 2-1. That was pretty lucky. I think this is a bad matchup. Probably this is like a 35% bad matchup for us. Probably one of our worst matchups. But juke him with Blood Moon. You know, when in doubt, try to juke him. That deck that plays all those food treasures and clues. I managed to beat this deck. I think I juked him with Blood Moon. This deck is kind of tricky, but you got to hold up your burn spells to be able to deal with that card that like duplicates everything and makes everything go out of control. That like 1/3 artifact creature. But since we've got so many spells that deal 3 or more damage, I'm not too worried about that card. Let's see here. Jeskai Delver, we also got a 2-0 against that. It's probably similar to, essentially very similar to Blue Red Delver. Some more Waterfalls. You know, that goes both ways, and I did have a loss against that. Mill, I think we're pretty decent against Mill, but you know, sometimes they can get you. I don't know what else to say really about Mill. Relic helps a lot. Always bring in Relic, because Relic, hold up your Relic as much as possible, because it's a hard counter to both Crypt Incursion and more importantly to Drown in the Loch. Oh yeah, and it reduces their Ancestral Recalls to Ops basically, or less than Ops. So yeah, I got yeah, I beat Bantron 2-1. Affinity 2-1, Blue Red Food. Yeah, not really too much sure what I can say about the Blue Red Food deck. Sometimes the Urzas can be a problem. The Urzas themselves aren't too bad because of all the Furies and Flame Slashes and stuff, but the tokens sometimes can be if they manage to make a lot of food in Game 1. In Game 2, Relic can help prevent the Daredevil shenanigans from making out of control food. But definitely lots and lots of food tokens can lead to almost unkillable you know, construct tokens, so something to keep in mind. And now I'm just basically seeing most of like similar type of decks. Oh, Enchantress. Enchantress is an interesting deck. I think that's a bad matchup. I do see that I did 2-1 them at least like in one of my leagues, but I do remember thinking at the time, like, I'm probably getting lucky here because I juked him with Blood Moon. And yeah, sometimes, you know, it's like Green Red Healing. Sometimes you can juke them with Blood Moon, and then sometimes you can pillage their Utopia's World Forest. But unlike Heliod, though, they play. My understanding is they play more lands. Also, they play more cantrips. They play more Oblivions. I mean, they play more like Oblivion Ring type effects. Like they, yeah. I think this is actually one reason why I went back to Bone Crusher Giant. The problem with Bone Crusher Giant is I used to think Bone Crusher Giant was going to be like my trump card to the matchup, because I thought, oh hey, I can just stomp them and then I can just burn face to finish them off. No, actually, unfortunately, their solitary confinement prevents them from being targeted. Oh. But you can at least stomp yourself, and if you've got a lot of creatures, sometimes you can swing for the win through a solitary confinement. But make no mistake, solitary confinement is problematic because we're playing red. We don't really have a lot of enchantment removal, so one of the main ways you have to beat them is just try to slow them down with Blood Moon, prevent them from playing as many enchantments. Hopefully juke them by finishing off finishing off their basics with pillage as much as you can. Even if you don't cut them off from playing spells, if you can limit them to playing one spell per turn, sometimes you can race them. I don't know what to say. I think it's a bad matchup, but it is beatable. But it's also not excellent. I mean, like, it's beatable, but it's probably like I used to see this deck a lot, but thankfully we don't see it that often anymore. It's probably like a slightly bad matchup, but it definitely is beatable. No, actually, it's maybe like a 40% bad matchup. I don't know. It's maybe a bit more than slightly bad, but it's one of the more beatable ones. Thankfully, one of the more beatable bad matchups. It's not like a Nauseam necessarily in here. I have my 1/2 loss against a Nauseam. Blue Red Storm. We don't really see this deck much at all, so I'm not going to say too much other than that. It doesn't really. The new cards don't really change all that much. You still want to bring in your relics in games 2 and 3. Yeah, you still want to be able to, you want to try to turn on Delirium as soon as possible, because attacking with a 3/3 Dragon Mace Channeler is one of the best tickets to victory. Yeah, Fury actually dealing with some of the Goblin tokens off of Empty the Warrens, that can sometimes help, so there is that. Yeah, Black-White Dead Guy. This falls into like the general black-centered mid-range type decks. Generally, I think we're pretty favored against these decks because we kind of out-Jun most of the Jun decks. I'm not really sure much more else to say about that. But you could also look at it like a Stoneblade deck, in which case, for some mysterious reason, Bant Stoneblade seems to be a bigger issue, and the other Stoneblades decks we seem to have done pretty darn well against. Bluetron, we 2-1'd. I think Bluetron is a worse matchup than Greentron. You just don't see it all that often. I don't know what to say. Yeah, I can't glean too much from a random win against Bluetron. Other than that, like sometimes you get them. Red White Burn, yeah. Radiant Fountain for the win. Here I took a loss against Amuletitan, but then I took a win the next time. Timur, Living End. I think that deck is super sweet. That deck actually can be kind of a problem, but one nice thing to keep in mind is sometimes it's good to just run your Furies out even without any targets, because that can slow down their Living Ends. Because think about it, if they only have like a Curator of Mysteries and if Curator of Mysteries is their biggest creature in their graveyard, then sometimes if you just preemptively ditch a Fury, then if they Living End, you get your Fury back, and then you kill that Curator of Mysteries, and now you've got a 3/3 double strike in play. So yeah, I don't know that. Don't overestimate like how helpful that can be. But certainly, if you have like 2 Furies in your hand, I think a lot of times it doesn't get much better for making use of those than just kind of running those out even without targets. Just to make like a post Living End situation a little better. Yeah, but definitely those sideboard relics really help out a lot. The sideboard of Magus has helped out a lot, because in game 1, a lot of times your only out is to try to stick a Blood Moon and color screw them, because they will outbrain you usually. With all their wraths and bringing everything back cards, it's just tough. But in games 2 and 3, you also have relics, and you also have the Magus to supplement the regular Blood Moons, plus Ragavan to maybe power them out earlier. It's a beatable matchup, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is a slightly bad matchup. But I think this is I don't know. Like one of the things is I just juke so many matchups so often that I don't know if it's just me getting lucky or if these are actually good matchups. But that's one of the nice things about Blood Moon is that sometimes it's hard to tell what a bad matchup is, because if they just get juked by Blood Moon, well, a win's a win. So, anyway. I do see Timur Living End quite a bit, so do be prepared for that. Yeah, took a loss against Enchantress. Took a loss to Heliod, of course. Took a loss to E-Tron. Yeah, this was not a good league here. Let's see here. Yeah, and then Red White Prowess. I've won most of these. This one in particular I'm looking at was a loss, but I think that one I got juked with like multiple core Firewalkers, and I just didn't see any of my Pirate Spell Bombs. So that could happen, but I think the vast majority of time, from my memory, I almost always beat Red White Prowess. But the pro red creatures in the sideboards definitely does give them more juke potential than blue red Prowess. So there is that. Okay, Hardened Scales. Here's another deck that I haven't talked about yet. Yeah, Hardened Scales. I see this deck more often. This deck goes both ways. I don't know like how to evaluate it in terms of like how good our matchup is. I see it a lot. I win a lot. I lose a lot. I don't know what else to say. Like and the funny thing is when I lose, I feel like I'm getting rolled. They have like a what do you call it? They have like a Arcbound Ravager, and like somehow I can't deal with it or the fallout. But then when I roll them, like I guess I fury a bunch of little creatures, and I guess they never get going with like I Blood Moon their utility lands, and I guess they never get going with the Arcbound Ravager. So I don't know. This is a weird deck. Yeah, sometimes I roll them, and sometimes they roll me. I don't know what to say. Yeah, and sorry, this has been going on for over an hour, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. Goblins. Yeah, Goblins is a great matchup. Again, Fury helps out a lot. Fury is actually kind of like our Goblin Ringleader. Like we got our own 5-mana Goblin Ringleader that we can also evoke out early if we want the effect earlier. But like this, like Fury is basically the missing piece of the puzzle that allows us to keep up with Goblins. I noticed Goblin players started to realize that the way you beat us is you just relentlessly keep searching up more Goblin Ringleaders. Sometimes they would try to go for the combo or something, and I'm like, how do these players not realize that we have like so much burn? Like they're not going to combo. The only way they combo is if they just draw into the combo naturally off of like going for all 4 Ringleaders, because then we end up spending so much burn on all these random like Sling Gang commanders, all these random 2/2 bodies, all these just random goblins. Sometimes they could sneak the combo in. In my experience, that's usually the only time they combo me with goblins, is when they're just trying to outgrind me, and then they kind of run me out of burn spells, and then like the combo just happens from like a natural draw rather than searching it up. That being said, just as soon as they started to catch on, I think, to how to approach our matchup better, so we get Fury, and I think Fury allows us to keep up, and that means I think Goblins is a solid favored matchup. But be careful, because an endless stream of Goblin Ringleaders always has the potential to overwhelm you. They have to whiff a few times. If they hit 4 Goblins every single time they search up a Goblin Ringleader, there's probably no beating that. But the good news is they're almost guaranteed to whiff a few times. For every Goblin Ringleader they hit, they usually, I don't want to say fully, there's different degrees of whiffing, but I would say for every card, I would say on average Goblin Ringleader hits 2 to 3 goblins, because there's so many lands, there's so many Aether Vials, there's just like a lot of cards that don't necessarily, get them there. Yeah, at least that's my experience. Also, sometimes they're playing green. I don't know if they're playing more green than just, if they're only playing green just for Ignoble Hierarch. But the more colors they splash, the more susceptible they might be to Blood Moon, so that's something to consider too. I haven't really explored that too much, though. Then there's Boomer Jund. I think I've already discussed it a little bit with Red Black Midrange, or I forget what it was called, or Dead Guy, but generally out Jund. And this was a 2-0, so not much to really say about Jund. Just buckle in. It's going to be a slogfest, but a lot of times we've got Fury, we've got so many new additions. Like I said, we basically have no air for the most part, and we don't have prowess creatures anymore. Prowess creatures kind of rely on having some critical mass of spells, but our Dragon Rage Channelers and Ragavans now are just individually pretty powerful. Also, Ragavan isn't as bad against Random 6 as you might think, because a lot of times you can just dash it, and if you dash it, it's immune to the ping, so that's something to consider. Anyway, I feel very confident that we've got a pretty solid matchup against Jund and other similar decks. Okay, Hammer Time. I beat Hammer Time 2-1. For whatever reason, I haven't run into this very much. I historically have not liked this matchup. I've only played it once in like a long time. Somehow I won. I think they got kind of mana screwed. Yeah, I don't know. My guess would be it's still probably like not a very great matchup, but I just haven't played it in such a long time. It's hard to evaluate how the new cards affect or change things much. I will say Blood Moon gets better when they're on Urza Saga, so there's that. Okay, Green Black Yawgmoth. This matchup can go both ways. I think we're actually favored, but it's very tricky. You actually kind of need Blood Moon, so prioritize Blood Moon a lot, and Magus in the sideboard helps a lot too. Because here's the thing, like, if it makes it, like, basically you have to try to Blood Moon and then kill as many creatures as possible, which might seem kind of self-explanatory. But, like, their mana base is pretty suspect, because they have so many black requirements because of Geralf's Messenger, and they have so many green requirements because of Court of Calling. You'd be surprised. A lot of times Blood Moon can severely screw them. Yeah, not sure what else really to say other than just they can be challenging. If they start going with Yawgmoth, always watch out for that Yawgmoth combo, and they've got that new squirrel combo thingy too. So yeah, but all I will say is that Blood Moon is super important. It's important enough that I see them bring in Force of Vigor. So obviously they think Blood Moon is pretty important. Okay. Okay, 8-rack. I'm not going to talk about 8-rack much. I feel like 8-rack is kind of similar to Jund, except that yeah, 8-rack is relatively favorable. Like it's just really nice that like you instantly draw a lot of cards with Seasoned Pyromancer, and then you can also just put a card in your hand at any time to just fill your hand by paying 3, putting Obosh to hand. Not much to say, I think, more about 8-rack. Just I think it's roughly around the same level of good matchup as Jund. Let's see, blue-black Asmo Food. That's definitely an unusual take, but I guess I'll take this opportunity to talk about the Asmo Food decks in general. I talked a little bit about the blue-red one, but like the blue-green one is the more common one. I'm not really sure. This was probably mostly a mono-blue type deck that splashed black for a few things, but yeah. So the Asmo Food deck, we have like a million answers to Asmo, which is nice. Let's see, Fury. Fury can sometimes be helpful if they have like a lot of. Well, I guess I'm thinking of the blue version with Thought Monitor. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Just the Relic in the sideboard can help. They have yeah. I remember kind of overrunning these decks a lot of times. Like, they don't necessarily have. The thing is we don't necessarily have a lot of answers to what they're doing, but they also don't necessarily have a lot of answers to what we're doing either. I remember sticking Obosh a lot and just going to town with direct damage, and oftentimes their food can't keep up. I remember like somehow Furies kind of clearing stuff and then just like getting in there. I remember Hammer. I think this is one matchup where I remember hammering again and again too on a few occasions. Like, yeah, I don't know what to say other than just that most of the Asmo decks, it just doesn't feel like as bad as you might think. We don't really care about the lifelink. We're not burn, and we don't care about the food for the most part in and of itself. Yeah. Oh, also we can Spike Field the cat in the decks that play the Cauldron Familiar, and which is always a plus. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Two more wins against Blue Red Delver. It's always nice. Red Black Goblins to take a game against that. Okay, there's that Creativity combo deck. I gotta be honest, that deck, I'm not 100% sure how to approach it. The problem is they're freaking Teferis, because like we have a lot of instant speed removal for their for their random Dwarven tokens, but it's also the fact that they can end of turn create like a treasure token and then Creativity combo targeting their treasure token. That feels a little unfair, because like it kind of forces us to have instant speed artifact hate to interact. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Just I haven't played that deck a lot, but it feels like whenever I run into that, I'm not entirely sure how to approach it. Um, yeah, it's just a little bit. It's a little bit tricky because, like I said, there's not. I don't feel like there's a lot I can do to an end of turn Prismari command, creating a treasure token, and then their turn they play Indomitable Creativity, go for either that 5/5 creature that casts their extra turn spells until they win, or a Mrokel. Yeah, the rest of his decks I've already played. Jund, Black Red Shadow, Dead Guy. Most of these were wins. Somehow I lost this one to Black White Dead Guy, but I think that falls in more into the Stoneblade category, where sometimes I think Sword of Fire and Ice just gets us if we're not like uh, humans. Another easy victory. There was a Blue-Red Phoenix deck that was cool. I think in general, though, the Blue-Red Delver decks are probably just better for the most part, but that was kind of cool to see somebody try to bring back Phoenix. Yeah, Ad Nauseam, lost to that one. Not a good matchup. Let's see, Shadow. I mean, they got lots of wins against Shadow here. Jeskai Control. Jeskai Stoneblade. A deck that was kind of similar to Yawgmoth, but seemed to play more Planeswalkers, so I don't know. Basically got all wins here. Yeah, Lotus Storm also, and I got a 5-0 here. Lotus Storm and all the other decks we've seen before. I had wins against all of them. Yeah, Lotus Storm. With 6 moon effects, yeah, you really want to prioritize seeing Blood Moon. The relics can kind of help with Past in Flames a bit, but yeah, like really, Blood Moon is kind of what shuts off their combo, you know. So, let me see here. I mean, the rest is basically stuff. Oh, there's somebody that played a Mardu Zombardment deck, like a Sam Black's old Zombardment deck from Legacy. That was cool. That's a very one-of type deck that you don't really see that often, but it was cool. But at the end of I will say this much: Spikefield Hazarding Gravecrawler sometimes is pretty cool. You know, I don't know what else to say. Let's see. I beat 2 Azuma food decks here, both blue-red and green-black. Again, I don't know what else to say other than that. We don't play a lot of answers to what they're doing, but they don't really play a lot of answers to what we're doing either. So, there's that. And I beat Red-White Prowess pretty easily here, it looks like. I beat Boggles, and I think somebody commented, like, how did I beat Boggles? Juking him with Blood Moon, I guess, how else? Probably not a good matchup, but still, it never ceases to amaze me how many theoretical bad matchups get juked by Blood Moon randomly. Stoneblade, that was an easy 2-0 somehow. Green-White Stoneblade. Tron, Grixis, Obosh, this was a 5-0, I think, yeah. Oh yeah, this is the one where I posted this one, Red Obosh Prowess. I beat the mirror match. Somebody was playing a version without Ragavan. That actually might have been better, except that except here's what happened. I drew more Furies, plain and simple. In game 1, they drew more Furies than me, so that's why it was 2-1. But in games 2 and 3, I drew all 4 Furies, and they didn't. I think the matchup is never, because the mirror match has never come down more than it has now to basically who draws one of a particular card. In the past, it was Seasoned Pyromancer. Now I think it's Fury. Like, if you draw more Furies, it's just very hard for the opponent to win. If they draw more Furies than you, it's really hard for you. Yeah, and then I took a loss against Affinity in my most recent league, but then I beat Yogg, Amulet Titan, Elementals, Bant Prison Tax. That was basically like a mono-white Taxes deck. I mean, Death and Taxes deck, but it had main deck Chalice. That was weird. Anyway, we somehow did manage to win that 2-0, even in game 1, without an answer to Chalice. I think I just pitched most of my 1-drops to Seasoned Pyromancer, and I didn't have a ton. Yeah. Anyway, look. So that's okay. So this took way longer than expected. Okay. So let me know. Let me know if this was. Yeah. I don't know. This is the first time I've done a video like this. So I hope that this was helpful enough. I hope this was helpful enough. But to me, this made the most sense. Because I kept this list of games that I had and how they went and whatnot. And I felt like, well, if people want sort of some type of weekly update, some type of strategy content, well, yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at here. And I mean, let's see, what else can I add as far as strategy? I mean, basically, here's the thing. Like, I think I could maybe add some abstract thoughts about the Obosh archetype, but I just feel like so much about the game of Magic is really ultimately about matchups. We're kind of like Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo in a way, in that sense. Like Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, like you can't really say like this player is just like, I mean, this character is just a good character in the abstract, because all of it comes down to how each of the 12 characters in that game interact with the other 11. You know, um, and I feel like the same in many ways is true for Magic decks. Like, you know, at the end of the day, I try to go over like a lot of these matchups, because like, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, our deck is only as good as our matchups, right? So I will say this much though: Ragavan into Blood Moon on turn 2 has never ceased to amaze me in how good it is. Um, Fury has you know, I mean, not all of these had Fury back in the main deck, but Fury has never really impressed me, and I don't see myself moving off Fury for anytime soon. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, I try to give a decent amount of theory content in my deck text if I can, and in my post leagues. So I'm really not much more. I'm really not sure what much more to say. But this is my first kind of strategy-ish type content that's not necessarily connected to any particular. That's not connected to like any particular list. Although I mostly have my most recent list that I've tweeted on about in mind. You know, with the with the main deck Furies and the main deck Bone Crushers and Dragon Race Channeler and Ragavan and so forth. Uh, yeah. So other than that, I mean, I'm not sure I have much more to say. Just let me know. Let me know how this one went. It's almost an hour and 30 minutes. So like, um, I like to watch a lot of these type of videos on double speed, and I hope you all are too, because I would imagine it's pretty hard to get through this if you're not watching on double speed. But you know, that's one thing I like about YouTube is you can watch stuff on double speed. So maybe I should have said this at the beginning of the video, but I didn't actually know how long this was going to last. In any case, I hope you all take care. I hope that this isn't too long, that it's not enjoyable. I guess, you know, I don't mind if anybody wasn't able to finish to the end. But yeah, just I hope you guys were using double speed, or you all, you know, guys and gals. I hope you were all using double speed. It definitely makes it much easier to get through long videos like this. And let me know what you all think. Uh, but I feel pretty good about where Obosh prowess is in the metagame right now. I guess I'll just leave with the thought that I feel like a lot of times, like how whether or not Obosh prowess is tier 1 or not, I think depends a lot on where Blood Moon is in the format. And right now, with Urza Saga freaking everywhere, and with very few monocolor decks out there to speak of, the closest thing I think to a monocolor deck that sees play oftentimes, and the funny thing is, even a lot of monocolor decks, Blood Moon does a lot of work against. Like you know, like a lot of monocolor decks play a lot of utility lands, like Hammer Time, for example. It plays a lot of Ink Moss, it plays a lot of Horizon lands. Sometimes it's not even that bad in that matchup. So anyway, but yeah, like basically, I feel like with all these Urzas and everything, Blood Moon is pretty darn well positioned right now, and I can feel like a lot of times, like how well Blood Moon is positioned, kind of goes along with whether or not Obosh prowess is tier 1. And I'd play Obosh prowess even if it wasn't tier 1, but I definitely think it's tier 1 right now. And obviously the fact that I got, what is it, like 9 trophies or something in like the last 3 weeks, I think says a lot to that effect. You know, once I started like taking out the prowess creatures and just going with like, you know, Dragon Race Channeler, really things started to kind of go pretty intense. So yeah. Anyway, so I'm gonna wrap it up here for good. I don't want this to hit the 1 hour 30 minute mark. So you all take care. Hope this does well. You know, thank you to all my patrons. You know, I'm shouting them out at the beginning of my deck tech videos now. So, you know, watch out for those. And yeah, and I guess I'll quickly shout out. Oh man, I actually got several new. Yeah, you know what? I'll save the shout outs for the deck techs. It's gonna be a little bit unmanageable, I think, if I shout out at the end of every video. But yeah, thank you all, everybody. Take care, and yeah, have a great week. Let me know. Hope this was good enough. Take care.